strength of his strength is actually in operation. And so my challenge to you is, in order to understand what he's saying, before you put on one thing, you got to recognize you must be strong in him and in the power of his might, knowing that that might that God has is already in strength that we're able to access and put into operation. Thoughts on that? Any thoughts? All right, let's keep working. So God has vast reservoirs of might that can be realized as power in our Christian life. But his might does not work in us if we sit down passively. His might works in us as we rely on it. And when we step out and do the work, and I can rely on it, I can rely on it and do no work. I can do work without relying on it, but both of these will fall short. I must rely on his might, then do the work. A lot of us are worn out. A lot of us are stressed thin because we're operating in our own might. We're operating in our own strength. But again, you can rely on it and do no work. You can do work and not rely on it. But both of those will fall short. In order to be able to move forward in our text, you must be sure that you tap into being strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. So meaning that it is not I do everything and God does nothing. It doesn't mean I do nothing and God does everything. I do all I can and God help me with what I can. So understand that each of these approaches, they fall short. But the key is for me to, by faith, rely on his might and rely on it more and more, and then to do the work. All right. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts? Come on, Facebook. Don't get quiet now. So, all right. So let's go on to verse 11. And in verse 11, it says, put on the armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. So putting on the armor of God, is very significant because in one context, I love what it says in the Amplified Bible. It says, for his precepts are like the splendid armor of a heavily armed soldier. So basically, he wants you to put on the precepts and the understanding of his word, because his word is the instrument that is used as our weaponry, that he's trying to make sure that we're skilled enough to know how to use it. And so when you get to these different elements of what the armor represents, it still connects to his word. And so here it is. I found this in study in Luke. The ancient Greek word for armor is used in only one place in the New Testament. So this word armor that's being used in Ephesians 6 is akin to what is found in Luke chapter 11, verse 21 and 22. And it says, Jesus speaks of the strong man who is fully armed, but is stripped of all his armor when a stronger one comes and defeats him. We know that Jesus disarmed all principalities and power that come in Colossians 2 and 15. So the armor is of God. This armor is of God, both in the sense that it is from him and in the sense that it is actual armor. In the Old Testament, it is the Lord who wears armor. That's Isaiah 59 and 17. I should have pulled it up also, but I'll get to that another time. But he now shares that armor with us. And that's why we know that greater is he that is in the world, that greater than he that is in me, than he that is in the world. That's why he tells us that we are more than conquerors, Romans 8 and 37. So understand this, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, meaning that we express the strength we have in God by standing against the wiles of the devil. Satan's scheme come up towards us to nothing when we stand in the power of God. And so understand, with this coming on in, I want to make sure Amplify says that we stand up against the schemes and the strategies and the deceits of the devil. For verse 12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, meaning that we're not contending only with physical opponents, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this present darkness, against the spiritual force of wickedness in heavenly places. So watch this. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Paul does not call the believer to enter into spiritual warfare. He simply announces it as a fact. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but we do wrestle against principalities and so forth. You're in spiritual battle. If you are ignorant or ignore that fact, then you're probably not winning the battle. You are going to wrestle. And I always like to encourage individuals with this. The fact that you're wrestling something says the thing that you're wrestling has not won. The thing that you're wrestling has not defeated you. The thing that you're wrestling has not caused you to be the victim, but you're yet a victor because you're wrestling. You're going against it. So again, we understand, and I don't want to go too deep in this because Pastor Wanda did a wonderful job last week. Principalities, spirit against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Paul used a variety of terms to refer to our spiritual enemies. We should regard them as being on many different levels and many different ranks, yet they all have one goal: to knock the Christian down from their place of standing. And that's something that Pastor Wanda was talking about last week. And you got to realize that's why I love that part. And having done all to stand. I think what is so challenging is how many of us are actually doing all and having done all to stand versus having all to stand and so I give up. Having done all to stand and I get frustrated. Having done all to stand, I'll go off and give you a mind. No, and having done all to stand, you still must stand. And so give me some thoughts about what we're talking about thus far. Any thoughts? Any insight? I got blessed quietness.
No, I think
when I see you.
Okay, it's so important because sometimes we don't know what that looks like to stand. There have been teachings on how to wait and how to, and even we look at it and say how to fight, but we don't know exactly. So I guess I put the question back out there is if we've done all that we know to do. And you just said sometimes we haven't done all that we know to do, but what is the hang up there? What is it? Do we not know really how to utilize those weapons, or are we fighting from a place of defeat?
Woo! Anybody want to comment on that? Are we coming from a place of defeat? Are we operating from a place of deficits? Come on. I see Pastor Tori. Come on in there. It says connecting the audio. I'm sorry.
I'll share while Pastor Tori. This is Ashley.
Go ahead.
I think that's interesting that Pastor Wanda said that because I was just writing about that this morning about fighting from a place of victory compared to fighting for victory. Like we already have the victory. And I don't think that a lot of times we recognize that or we stand in that confidence.
That's good.
And I think also when either you or her just said, like, do we utilize the weapons? Like, do we utilize our armor well enough? And like y'all know, with the youth ministry, we've been studying this. And I don't think so, because as we do live devotionals where there are adults on there, a lot of times we don't know what these things mean. So we don't know seriously what righteousness is, or we don't know what the gospel of peace is, or we don't know why we should have on our helmet of salvation. So we end up falling victim to things that we don't have to if we properly put on our armor. So after that, we could stand.
I think I love that other part that you said too from the beginning. Everything was good, but we are not fighting to gain victory. We are fighting from a place of victory. I believe that's what I heard you say. Am I correct?
Yes. We're not fighting for victory. We're fighting from victory. Once we say yes to God and he joins our team, we're automatically victorious. We're automatic. We already have it. He's already overcome death, hell, and the grave.
Come
If
on,
God